sign of the deer. One day, the hunters from that tribe were looking for wildfowl when a deer appeared before them. It entered the lake and seemed to be showing the humans the way. Following the animal, the hunters crossed the Maeotian Lake, which was considered impassable like a sea. As soon as the men saw the Scythian land, the deer disappeared. I believe this was done by the spirits of the Huns' descendants out of hatred for the Scythians. Just like that, following the deer's directions, the Huns crossed onto the other side of the Sea of Azov, also known as the Maeotian Lake, and went on to conquer the much-coveted European territories. The precise time when the deer entered the lake and therefore became a part of world history is well known, 371 AD. Unlike the history of the Huns themselves, they're famous in large part because of Attila. The rest of it is all secrets and mysteries. Chapter 1. Conductor of the Thin World. Care, food, protection from predators, all done for this moment. The red deer is relieved of its crown after it grows 5 antler rings. The cutting of the antlers is a stressful period. It is vital not to miss the right moment and prevents the antlers from ossifying and breaking. Among themselves, when you are herding them, they will beat and break each other's antlers. They break them off, especially if one has already bowed down its head, the other will surely break the antlers with its legs. For the cutting, the animals are placed into aviaries. The deer are locked up in special compartments, one by one. The ancient symbol of ancient peoples, it was worshipped by the Saka. According to one version, their name means deer. To them, deer were conductors between the world of the living and the world of the dead, and the Huns believed the animal to be their progenitor. It is not by chance, then, that according to historians' assumptions, the ancestors of these people were certain Saka tribes. When describing the customs of the Huns, Roman ambassador Priscus wrote that they were all thoroughly Scythian. However, the Huns did not favor Scythians. They worshipped the god of the sky Tengri and the god of earth and water Yersu. But in general, ancient writers were insufficiently informed about the Huns and their life. There reside ferocious tribes beyond the Maeotian swamp toward the Arctic Ocean. Their savagery exceeds all measure, wrote Roman historian Ammianus Marcellinus. Beyond the Maeotian swamp toward the Arctic Ocean was the geographical directions of the ancient ones to the precise location of the Asian steppes. As far as the savagery is concerned, Marcellinus could not have written it out of fear. It should be noted that the most famous Hun, Attila, knew several languages and was quite a literate man. They're all regarded as savages, but they were bringing culture into their time in history. Every nation was bringing their culture something new. Naturally, some of it was positive, some negative. According to one version, the ancestors of the Huns originated from eastern Kazakhstan. Famous explorer Pallas classifies them as the Altai people. However, his theory is contradicted by others who name North China, Mongolia and the Urals the homeland of the fierce and frightening Huns. This is one and the same nation, say the Chinese, which bore different names under different dynasties. Hunyu, Tukyu, Mongku and Tata. It appears that during the ruling of China's oldest dynasty here, the name of the nation Hunyo became known for the first time. The name could very well mean people, because it was quite rare for nations and tribes to give themselves their own names. Instead, they used nation and people. China's dynasty here existed until the 16th century AD. However, the time of the beginning of the Huns remains a mystery to this day. This is only one of the many theories. According to another version, there was a warlike nomadic nation living either somewhere on the territory of China or the Semirechu. They were called exactly that, the horse-breeding Sirong people. They were breeding cattle and stealing glances at the Chinese throne, which they eventually conquered, having founded a new Chinese dynasty, Zhou. The head of the empire was called Wang, the Great Prince. The rulers of low ranks were called Huns, which was something like duke. Incidentally, the famous Confucius originated from the Surong people. In the ancient history of Kazakhstan, there's a great number of knots which represent the formations of other nations' cultures and of the nations themselves. After that, there's a several centuries long gap, and it wasn't until the 3rd century AD that the state formed by Turkic tribes, Sunyu, was first mentioned. The Great Wall of China is erected as a protection measure against them. However, it remains unknown whether all these people were in fact related, as there is yet another gap in history a couple of centuries long. A more or less comprehensive history of the Huns became available only in our time, approximately in the 2nd century AD. That was when several nomadic tribes united and the world shuddered. Chapter 2. Grand Conquerors. According to specialists, at the moment of cutting, red deer experience no pain, and the antlers grow back next spring. After the procedure, the wound is processed with mastic to ensure proper healing, and then the deer is released. Afterwards, the stock breeders collect the most precious material, the blood. They squeeze it out of the antlers. This is the miracle substance. They say it used to be an ancient tradition of the Huns. Supposedly, they used the substance to strengthen their health and vitality before military campaigns. They became a force to reckon with. Of course, none of it happened overnight. However, no one has ever managed to study the history of the Huns' ascent in detail. There's too little data available and too many contradictions. The Huns roam the mountains and forests. They're taught to endure cold, hunger and thirst since infancy. They spend the whole day on horseback. They buy and sell, drink and feed. They do everything leaning on the strong necks on their horses. They fall asleep and sleep so deeply that they even dream. When the time comes to discuss some serious matters, they hold the conferences on horseback. None of them plows. None of them has ever touched a plow in their lives. Jom, Hun, Gun, these peoples had one thing in common. They were all outstanding riders and incredibly warlike. With the help of this bow, the Huns could conquer the world. They could, and they did. Not the whole world, of course, but the success was definitely achieved with the help of the famous Huns bow, also known as the Scythian bow. According to the Roman interpretation, the bow had a remarkable far range. Needless to say, Romans regarded it as a very valuable trophy. When a man is struck by an arrow, he's in a great deal of pain and can hardly move, and after the battle is finished, he comes back with an akinak and finishes the victim off. Sometimes they dip the arrow tips in protamine or some other kind of poison, attached drilled bone balls to the arrows, which made the latter produce a frightening whistling sound as they pierce the air. A commanding kind of sound or intimidating. It is a well-known fact that the Huns prefer to fight without dismounting. They attack their enemy by drowning the latter in the heavy flow of flying arrows. They always started by shooting their bows. They had a unique strategy. Of course, when you're shooting one arrow after another without stop, it is hard to hit the target that way. So they moved in a slow circle. One would make a shot and move farther along, lowering his arms and resting them while he was at it. Another warrior replaced him, then another and another. So the rain of arrows was hitting the enemy continuously and without stop. The Huns were also famous for worshipping the sword and making sacrifices for it, based on the customs that were decidedly Scythian. Attila believes himself to be destined to become the ruler of the whole world, and that the sword of Mars will grant him dominance in battles. You are looking at the reconstructed attire of a Hun warrior. When a soldier died, his weaponry was burned along with his body. It is also said that Huns succeeded in conquering half the world with the help of one Chinese invention, stirrups. The stirrups enabled the riders to sit in the saddle with greater confidence, which in turn made them appear even more warlike. The Huns amassed vast experience of warfare. By the 4th century AD, it greatly exceeded Europe's. This famous legend about a deer dates back to that time. Chapter 3. Father of all Huns. 5 minutes before the traghetto or ferryboat departs. San Marco next stopped the Torcello Island. It is called the Mother Venice, another small Byzantium. This is the place where the history of Venice began. According to one version, it was founded thanks to the Huns. In the 5th century AD, the leader of the Huns, Attila, conquered these parts. The few surviving Veneti local tribe were forced to flee. They found refuge on the Lagoons Island. These first settlers became the initial Venetians. By the way, there's a legend that the word Venice also originates from deer. Veneto means deer. Whether or not this has anything to do with the Huns remains unknown. This stone throne is a constant reminder of the barbarian leaders' stay in these parts. It is located on the Torcello Island, and it's called exactly that, Attila's throne. They say, however, that the Huns leader never sat on it. It was erected much later. The conquest of Europe by the barbarians lasted several decades. They first invaded the south of Russia, settled in, and then gradually proceeded forward. Mid-5th century, the name of the new leader of the Huns translates as father. The father of all Huns, Attila, invaded the Byzantine Empire, even attempted to besiege Constantinople, but local residents were able to negotiate with the Huns and reach an agreement, or rather pay them off. The Byzantines paid a considerable tribute, and in a triumphant procession, the hordes of barbarians headed toward the Roman Empire. Baffled Roman historians whispered, none other than the dark forces themselves are helping them, calling the invaders the scourge of God. They conquered not only with their combat, but also by inspiring the greatest horror with a frightening appearance. The image of them was horrifying with its blackness, so to speak, and instead of faces that had ugly lumps with holes for eyes, their fierce appearance betrayed the spirit of cruelty. Contemporaries noted the strict discipline in the camp of the Huns. They rush into battle, all lined up in the shape of a wedge, and produce a terrible howling cry. Nimble and strong, they suddenly and purposefully disperse, and without falling into the battle line, attack the enemy here and there, committing gruesome murder. One after another, European cities fell to the barbarians' feet. Cologne, Reims, Trier, Mediolanum, modern-day Milan, but in the early 5th century, the capital of the Roman Empire, and now they were getting really close to Rome. The Huns did not destroy the Eternal City. Apparently another deal was struck, but how, no one knows. Everything was over in a heartbeat. According to one version, during one of Attila's wedding feasts, his new wife, the daughter of the leader of the Germanic Burgundians tribe, stabbed the ruler of half the world, thus avenging for the death of her native people. They were the storm of the universe, but they disappeared as suddenly as they had once appeared. In the steppe, there is some sort of pot. From time to time, people come out of it and depart in different directions. They become different. And then another pot boils, and this wave comes crashing down once again. And so it is repeated several times, in Scythian time and in the time of the Huns. Their great treasures are being searched to this day, as is the answer to the question, who were they really? One thing is certain, the Huns put an end to the history of Scythia and almost did the same thing with the Roman Empire, and the European campaign, which had been initiated on the Dia's transition, proved to be their last. With the death of Attila, the Hun era ended. By the end of the 5th century, the great empire ceased to exist, and the Huns themselves were surrounded in Pannonia, the territory of modern Hungary. The massacre in Pannonia became their grave. About 30,000 Huns and their faithful allies were killed. The legacy of the Hun invasion still remains the subject of historical research and certainly future historical discoveries. Fierce descendants of the sacred deer, Conductor between the world of the dead and the world of the living, it showed them the way to Europe. But in the end, this path brought them to ruin, and there is nothing strange about it. He who gives life often causes death in equal measure.